Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf, which is the Eruvin Daf Lamed Daled. We are 4 lines from the top of the Amud, Esvei. What happened was that Rav Papa quoted Rav Yirmiyah as saying that we can apply the concept of Hoyel to Erev Tchumen. He was speaking specifically in a case where a person placed his bread in a basket and hung it up high on a tree, where it is Rishus HaYachid, and he'd like to use that food, that Erev, to activate his Erev, his Shvisa, his place of residence below, down in Rishus HaRabim. Generally speaking, the food must be present in the location of the actual place of residence, the Malkam Shvisa. Rabbi tells us in this case no concern, because theoretically he can access his food from where he is. How? By tilting that basket towards him and bringing his bread down. So Rav Yirmiyah applies the concept of Hoyel, since theoretically he can do something to access his food from his Malkam Shvisa, that is sufficient to activate the Erev. So Rav Papa quoted Rav Yirmiyah, and Rav Bar Shava asked him a kasha from a brisa, and here he's going to ask him another kasha from another brisa. Esvei asked him a kasha on this concept of Hoyel. We seem to see from this coming brisa that Hoyel cannot be applied to Erev Tchumen. The brisa says in Skavan Lishbois Rishus HaRabim, if he intended on establishing his Malkum Shvisa in Rishus HaRabim, right on the street, but he placed his food, his Erev, in a wall. So it depends where he placed it. Lamata Masar Tzfachim, if it was below the 10 tefach mark, in which case it's within the jurisdiction of Rishus HaRabim, Eruv Erev, then it's okay, because his Shvisa is in Rishus HaRabim, and likewise his Erev is in Rishus HaRabim, so they're both in the same location. Lamalam Yutfachim, however, if he places Erev in a wall above 10 tefachim, in which case it is a Rishus HaYachid, a Eruv Erev, then it doesn't work, because his Shvisa is in Rishus HaRabim, his food is elsewhere, in Rishus HaYachid, he has no access to it. And therefore, it cannot activate his Erev. Continues the brayso with another case. Let's say this time he intended on making his Malkum Shvisa up on the Roish of the Shevach. Shevach is his birdhouse, so up on top, which is a Rishus HaYachid. Or B'Roish HaMigdal, on top of a closet. So here we have the Malkum Shvisa on a Rishus HaYachid. And he places Erev in a wall nearby. L'malam Yutfachim. So in this case, it will come out in the reverse. If the Erev was up high on that wall, l'malam Yutfachim, above 10 tefachim, where it's a Rishus HaYachid, then you're okay. Eruv Erev, then it works, because the Erev is in Rishus HaYachid, and likewise, this fellow is being Shevis on top of this closet, which is Rishus HaYachid. L'matam Yutfachim, however, if the Erev is below 10 tefachim, so it's sitting, let's say, 9 tefachim above the ground, where it's considered Rishus HaRabim. Rashi says it's, for instance, a place where the Rabbim, it's publicly used, they use it to adjust their loads, and therefore it's considered Rishus HaRabim. In this case, it doesn't work, because the Erev is in Rishus HaRabim, in contrast to this person who's being Shevis up on top of this closet, which is a Rishus HaYachid. Says the Gemara V'amai, but why is this a problem? Here as well we can apply the concept of Hoyel. Let's say since Hoyel v'Yachal and Toisai, since he has the ability to lean the closet over, Lovil Techasora, and bring it down within the 10 tefach of the ground, meaning, although his Malkum Shvisa was up on the top of the closet, top surface, which is beyond Rishus HaRabim, it's 10 tefach above the ground, and his Erev was situated nearby in a wall, which was merely 9 tefach of the ground, which is considered Rishus HaRabim. But since he can't theoretically tilt that closet sideways, so that the top surface dips down below 10 tefachim and reaches the Rishus HaRabim, in this case, he'll have access to his Erev. So if he applied the concept of since theoretically he can do something to bring his Erev closer to him, or himself closer to his Erev, that is sufficient to activate the Erev. So here as well, why can't he do that? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yirmiyah. You're right, generally speaking, Hoyel can be applied. This is Rav Yirmiyah himself answering. Hoyel can be applied, for instance, in the case of the basket, he can tilt it downward, that's okay. You know, we're speaking about a migdal, a closet which was mesumar, which was nailed into the ground, and therefore it's not portable. It's immobile. They can't go and tilt it. So it's a practical impediment that's preventing him from accessing the food of his Erev. Even if we're speaking about a migdal which was not hammered into the ground, it's portable. We're speaking about a tall closet, which creates a problem. Because even if he tilts it just a bit, meaning he'd like to get the top surface to dip down below 10 tefachim, to get it equal with the Erev, it's going to leave the original 4 amos. And therefore, it's invalid for the Erev. Meaning, you have the closet, and the top surface of the closet is considered to be his makom shvisa. That's where he establishes his place of residence. And his Erev is nearby. Problem is, the Erev is at the 9 tefach mark, which is Rosh Hashanah. Now, when he begins tilting this closet, so the top surface dips down below 10, since it's a very tall closet, once he begins tilting it and gets it to below 10, that top surface of that closet has been removed from the original makom shvisa, which was here. It's out of the 4 amos of that makom shvisa. So it's out of bounds. It's not within the original area of his makom shvisa. So his original makom shvisa cannot access, does not have proper access to his Erev. It's only if it tilts it away from his original makom shvisa, then he can access his Erev. And that's ineffective. The Erev needs to be accessible to the original makom shvisa, the place where he actually establishes his Shabbos residence. As opposed to this case where if you apply the concept of oil, and you view the closet though it's been tilted sideways, you need to move away drastically from your original makom shvisa out of the original 4 amos. So the original 4 amos don't really have access to the Erev, and therefore, in this case, the Erev doesn't work. Continues the Gemara. Hechidami. Now, what are we speaking about? If there is a window in this closet through which he can access the food in the wall, and he has a rope which he can tie to the food of the Erev. What it means is like this. If he theoretically can have access to his Erev during Ben Hashmashes, for instance, if there's a window within that closet, so some Farshim explained that in this case you don't actually need a window because his makom shvisa is on top of the closet. The Mishnah is addressing a case where he was shavis inside the closet. He needs to have a window through which he can access the food of the Erev which is in the wall. Umasnan, he has a rope which he can attach to that Erev. Now the halacha is, if a person is sitting in Rosh Hashanah and he's holding on to a rope which is tied to an object which is present in Rosh Hashanah, min ha-Torah, he can go ahead and pull that item to him because it's called igudah b'yadai. It's partially still in his hands. It's not really situated in Rosh Hashanah. He's holding on to it. So min ha-Torah, he can go retrieve that Erev, even if the Erev is sitting on a wall which is Rosh Hashanah, and he's in the migdal which is Rosh Hashanah. So min ha-Torah, he can retrieve it. It's only Issa D'Rabbanan. Now, we mentioned earlier that following Shitas Rebbe, who holds that Issa D'Rabbanan, Shvus, will not apply during Bein HaShmashes, which is the twilight zone between Friday and Shabbos, when the Erev is actually activated. So since he has access to the Erev, at that point in time, he can freely pull it in, retrieve the Erev from where it is to the closet. Says the Gemara, if so, the Erev should be valid, because he has full access to the food of his Erev where he is, inside the Migdal, or on top of the Migdal. Says what type of case are we speaking about? If there's a window and a rope, let him go retrieve the Erev using the kafsa and the misna. Says more the Leslie kafsa misna. Apparently we're speaking about there's no window or rope. So the Erev is sitting out in the Shesarabim and he's in the Shesayachid, and therefore the Erev does not work. So in summary, the Gemara concludes, according to Yirmiyah, Hoya will work. But practically speaking, in this case, where he was sitting on the Migdal and the Erev was nearby in Rosh Hashanah, there's a problem here. Either we're speaking about a Migdal which was immobile, it was nailed to the ground so you can't tilt it over to the food, or we're speaking about a very tall Migdal, in which case, even if you would tilt it, in order to get the top surface of that Migdal to dip down below 10 tefachim, it's going to be removed drastically from the original Makom Shvisa, and of 4 Amas of the original Makom Shvisa. Therefore, it doesn't work because the food of the Erev needs to be accessible at the point of Ben Hashmashes to the original Makom Shvisa, which in this case won't work because the original Makom Shvisa is Sayachid and the Erev is sitting in Rosh Hashanah. So somewhere we have two cases in the Brisa. The Brisa begins with a case that he was Shavis in Rosh Hashanah, placed his Erev on a wall. The Brisa says, well, if the Erev is within 10 Tfachim to the ground, which is Rosh Hashanah, it will work. If it's up above, beyond 10 Tfachim, then the Erev is Rosh Hashanah and he's Rosh Hashanah, it won't work. In the opposite case where he was Shavis on the Rosh Hashanah, on this Migdal, and his Erev was nearby, so if the Erev is above 10 Tfachim, in which case he and the Erev are on the same Rosh, then it's okay. But it's below 10 Tfachim, in which case the Erev is in Rosh Hashanah and he's in Rosh Hashanah, in this case the Erev will not work. Continues the Gemara. The Mishnah told us in Son of a Bar, Afilu Omek Mei Amma. If you place the Erev in a deep pit, 100 Amas deep, then it's okay. Now apparently the Mishnah is teaching us a novelty, a Chiddush, that even a deep pit can accommodate the Erev. Says the Gemara, let's analyze the case. Where was this pit located? If it was in an enclosed area in Shusayachid, Pshita. Then of course, why would I think that an Erev in a deep pit in Shusayachid would be problematic? If his Makam Shvisa is in an enclosed area, and his Erev is sitting in a pit within that enclosed area, it can be as deep as you want. The entire area is one single domain of Shusayachid, and he and his Erev are in the same Rishus. Pshita, Rishus HaYachid, Oida Adarakia. We know that Rishus HaYachid extends upwards until the heavens. Just as it extends upwards, limitless, likewise, it descends downward. 100 amas deep. There's no difference between going up and going down. Therefore, what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? It places in a bur, even if 100 amas deep, then it works. It's all the same thing. It's all Rishus HaYachid. Apparently we're speaking about that the bar was situated in a public area, just a rab. And the bar itself, which is 10 tefachim deep, is Rosh Hashanah. Says more, let's analyze the case. In Eskavan Lishbeis Hecha, where did he intend on being Shabbos? Meaning, where did he establish his Shabbos residence? Ilam Malo, if he intended on being Shabbos on top, meaning outside of the bar in Rosh Hashanah, then we have a problem. Hu b'makam echad. This fellow is situated in one rishus in Rosh Hashanah. Eruvin makam acharu, and his Erev down in the pit is in a different location. It's just a yachid. He has no access to it, and it cannot be chal. It cannot generate an Erev tchumen. Ilamat. Shall we say that he intended on establishing his makam shvisa down below in the pit? Here again, pshita. Then of course it would work. Hu ve'eruvay b'makam echad. This person and his Erev are both situated in the same location. So what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? If you place the Erev in a deep pit, it works. Why would I think otherwise? Apparently we're speaking about the Koy Karmelis. This bar was situated in a Karmelis, an open area, a field area. And the bar itself, of course, is a Rosh Hashanah because it's a pit which has at least 10 tefachim in depth. So it creates its new entity, Rosh Hashanah. So we have a pit which is Sayachid, situated in a field which is a Karmelis. And he established his Shvisa on top, meaning outside the bar, which is a Karmelis. So he's in a Karmelis, and his Erev is down in a pit, in a bar which is Sayachid. Here the Mishnah is teaching us a Chiddush. Although it seems like the person and his Erev are situated in two different areas, two different locations. He's in a Karmelis, his Erev is in a pit which is very deep, meaning it's Rosh Hashanah. Nevertheless, it works. V'Rebbe, we'll follow Shittas Rebbe, the Amar Kol Davar Shum Mishum Shvus. Anytime we have an Issa D'Rabbanan on Shabbos, like Gozol Ben Hashmashos, this was not applied to Ben Hashmashos, which is the moment in time when the Erev gets activated. And since transferring the Erev from the bar, which is Rosh Hashanah, over to the Makam Shvisa outside the bar, which is a Karmelis, only entails an Issa D'Rabbanan. So since this Issa D'Rabbanan does not apply Ben Hashmashos, which is the point when the Erev is activated, we say that this Erev is valid and it works following Shitas Rebbe. So that's the Chiddush of the Mishnah. He was in a Karmelis, his Eruv was sitting in a bar, but not just a shallow bar, which is perhaps a carmelist, but a deep bar, which is 10 tefachim or more, which is a Rishus HaYachid, we say the Eruv works. Continues the Mishnah. The Sani B'reish HaKana, if you place the Eruv on top of a pole, a reed, a bamboo stick, or B'reish HaKundis, on top of some type of branch, and his Makam Shvisa was down below in the Rishus HaRabim. Says the Mishnah, Bizman Shu Tolush V'Notz. When these branches, when these bamboos were tolush, detached from the ground, they're not growing out of the ground, V'Notz, and they were simply inserted into the ground, so we have detached branches. In this case it works. Afilu Gavayakov Amma, even if it's 100 Amas high, Harei the Eruv works. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, which is 4 lines from the top of the Amud. Masnisim. Kundas ploibalaz ve'enu mechubarim. They're not attached to the ground. They're not growing currently from the ground. Ubu Gemara Parich. The Gemara is going to ask a kasha. Why do we insist? Why does the Mishnah stipulate that these things were detached from the ground? Let's say they were still growing out of the ground. Generally, a person is not meant to use a tree growing out of the ground. But we just established that our Mishnah is following Shittas Rebbe, who says that an Issa D'Rabbanan, such as making use of a tree, is mutar ben hashmashes, which is the moment when the Eruv is activated. So why does the Mishnah stipulate that this branch needs to be detached from the ground? You've just told me that the Reisha, meaning the first portion of the Mishnah, on Daf Lamed Beis, is Rebbe's Shita. The Amar Lei Gozer b'Mechuba ben hashmashes, who says that the Chacham would not, Gozer did not prohibit using something attached to the ground, ben hashmashes. So I was going to get to that. Continues Rashi, Afilu Gavay Meya Amma. So even if this branch is 100 Amas high, but since at the bottom, with it connects to Rishus HaRabim, it doesn't have a width of 4 tefachim, it's not considered Shayachid. Although on top, you have a surface of 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, which is required for the placement of the Eruv. The Eruv al gabi makom dal binan, because this we learned earlier, the Eruv which is placed up high in the air needs to be placed on a makom chashav, on a surface area of 4 by 4 tefachim. This was Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, we learned that earlier. Despite the fact that the makom, the Eruv here, is a wide surface area, nevertheless, as Rashi, it's not a Shayachah because it's suspended mid-air. The pole is a narrow pole, and therefore, since where it reaches Shram down below, it's a narrow pole, it's not 4 tefachim wide, it does not generate a Shayachid, and therefore the Eruv is valid. Although he is sitting on the Rishus HaRabim, as the Eruv is up high on the pole, they're both considered to be in the same Rishus HaRabim. Continues the Gemara. Ramile Rav Ada bar Masna Rava. So Rav Ada bar Masna asked the kasha to Rava. This was the kasha which Rashi referenced. The Mishnah says if he placed his Eruv on a kana, on this bamboo, which was tolush v'noetz in, only if it was detached from the ground and it was inserted, then it's okay. Loy tolush v'noetz loy, but otherwise it's no good. Meaning, if it's still growing out of the ground, this Eruv doesn't work. Apparently, because it's also to use something which is mechubar l'karka. Now, although the Eruv needs to be activated ben hashmashes, apparently there's an issa to use a mechubar l'karka during ben hashmashes. Mani rabbani. Apparently, we found shittas rabbanon the amri called avashim shvus. Even issa the rabbanon goes over ben hashmashes, applies to ben hashmashes as well. So this part of the Mishnah, the Gemara is going to call it the Sefer. Apparently, the Mishnah had 2 parts. The part that we just learned is called the Sefer of the Mishnah, and the earlier portion of the Daf Lamed Beis was called the Reish of the Mishnah. So the Sefer of the Mishnah is Rabbanon, who say that an Issa Shvus applies to Hashmashes. Therefore, we insist that this pole be detached from the ground. For Amras, Reisha Rebbe, but you've said that the Reisha is following Shittas Rebbe, who holds that the Shvus does not apply to Hashmashes. Says the Gemara, Reisha Rebbe v'Sefer Rabbanon. So we say that the first part is Rebbe, who holds that Shvus doesn't apply ben hashmashes, and therefore he can place the Eruv in the pit, although it requires transferring to the Carmelis. Or we have the other case of placing it on the tree as well, which was within 10 tefachim to Rishus HaRabim, and it involved the Issa Rabbanon because he's going to have to remove from the tree. So we have 2 cases in the Reish of the Mishnah which reflect Rebbe's Shita, the Sefer Rabbanon, and this part of the Mishnah, reflects Shitas Rabbanan. Therefore, we stipulate that the branch needs to be detached from the ground. Otherwise, you can't use the branch. So it seems to be inconsistent. First part of the Mishnah is Rebbe, second part is Rabbanan. Amar lei, so Rabba responded, yeah. Kva Rami lei, Rami bar Chama, Rav Chizda. This same kasha was already asked by Rami bar Chama to Rav Chizda, v'shanel, and indeed he answered him, Reisha Rebbe, v'sefer Rabbanan. First part reflects Rebbe, and the second part of Mishnah reflects Shitas Rabbanan. Rabbeinu Amar, Kula Rebbe. Entire Mishnah reflects Rebbe's Shita, who holds that a Shvus does not apply ben Hashmashos. So what is the Pshat in our Mishnah? Why does the Mishnah insist that this Kana be detached from the ground? Because in this case we have a special concern. We have an added concern above and beyond your typical tree usage. V'seifa, Gzeira Shema Yiktim. There's an additional concern that since we're speaking about just a bamboo, he might be inclined to trim it. So, for instance, instead of troubling himself to go climb up and get his Eruv, which is all the way up on the Kana, he'll trim it, he'll snip the bamboo, and bring down the Eruv in this manner. So this is different than your typical standard tree, where there's no Issa ben Hashmashis. The concern there is that when he climbs up on the tree, he might want to make himself comfortable and pull off a branch, pull off a leaf. That only applies to a tree. And in that case, Rebbe holds the Isser doesn't apply ben Hashmashis because it's just a minimal concern. Whereas when we're speaking about a bamboo, where it's actually very convenient just to snip the bamboo and bring out the Eruv, even Rebbe would agree that it's an Isser to use this ben Hashmashis, and that is the Pshat Now Mishnah. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. 10 lines from the top of the Amud, beginning with the word Gemara. So the Gemara asks the Kasha, if we're following Shitas Rebbe, who holds that one can use a tree during Ben Hashmashis, how do we understand the Mishnah which says Tolosh v'notes, only when it's detached, Hudave Erev, Aval Mechuber, but if it's still attached to the ground, Lo Have Erev, then it does work. Why? Mechu Mishum. The Chishakale Mishtamash Be'ilam, because when he's going to remove that Erev, he has to have access to his food. So when he has access, when he removes the Erev, he's going to be using the tree. So apparently, there's an issue to use a tree even Ben Hashmashis? How does this work with Shitas Rebbe? And the Gemara tells us we have an answer. That when we're speaking about a standard tree, indeed Rebbe does not subscribe to an Issa there. Whereas when we're speaking about this Kana, where a person may be more inclined to trim it and snip it to get his Erev, even Rebbe would agree there's an Issa to use this Ben Hashmashis. Gzeir Sham Yiktam, Rachu, because this Kana is relatively soft. Ikal Migzar Sham Yiktam, there's a concern that he might trim it. Kishakale, when he removes his Erev. Aval Ilon Kashu. However, your standard tree is a hard tree. Uben Hashmashis. L'shema Yala B'yitlish Techashinan. And we're not concerned that during Ben Hashmashis he'll get up and pull off a branch when he climbs up that tree. Rebbe does not hold that there's an Isser there. In contrast to the reed, which is different. Aval Ktimas Kana Vadahi. However, when it comes to trimming the Kana, that's a very real concern. I did the Rekicha Miktuma, due to the fact that it's soft and easily trimmed. Perhaps he'll go ahead and trim it to remove this Erev, in which case it would involve an Issa min HaTorah, because actually trimming the Kana is a Malach of Kaitzer. That's not really Issa D'Rabbanan. V'lav Shvusu, that's not just Issa D'Rabbanan, Ela Malacha. It's a real Malacha, the Machai B'Shem Kaitzer. So since placing an Erev on a Kana, which is attached to the ground, entails an additional concern, a very real chashash, that he might actually trim that Kana while he's removing the Erev. Trimming a Kana is a Malach of Kaitzer. So even Rebbe agrees. That concern applies even Ben Hashmashis. That's the Pshat in the Sefer. The Mishnah tells us you can't place an Erev on an attached Kana. In contrast to the Reisha, we're speaking about your standard tree, a hard tree, and the concern there is not he's going to snip the tree, but perhaps he's going to climb up, and while he's doing so, he might make himself comfortable, pull off a branch, pull off a leaf, and that's a minimal chashash, a minimal concern. And Rebbe holds that Issa will not apply Ben Hashmashis. Continues the Gemara, Hu Pil Musa, the Aslan Hardah. There was this group of Chayil HaMelech, Rashi says, a group of soldiers who arrived at Nahardah, and they crowded the area. There wasn't enough room for the Talmidim to sit and learn. Amalur of Nachman. So Rav Nachman told his Talmidim, Pulka, go out, Avidu Kvushi, Kavshi Ba'agma. Avidu Kvushi, go and push down, press down, Kavshi Ba'agma. Kavshi means the press down reeds in the swamp. So you go ahead and make some pressed down reeds, konim, so that we can have a place to sit. Ulamachar, so that tomorrow Neza will go out, the Neza Alayim will go sit on them. So go create a convenient place so that we can sit and learn. So we see that you can go ahead and sit on these konim, on these reeds, which have been pressed down, although they're still attached to the ground. Eisvei Rami Bar Chama Rav Nachman. So Rami Bar Chama asked Rav Nachman a kash. The Amila, some say, was Rav Ukra Bar Abba Rav Nachman. How can one use these reeds which are still attached to the ground? We have a Mishnah which says that an Erev can only be placed on a kana which was detached, tolish. Only if it was detached no, it's and inserted into the ground, then it can be used. Loi tolish v'loi no, it's loi, but otherwise you can't. So we see that a kana, a reed, is classified like an elam, like a tree. In which case it's included in the Issa Rabbanan, who say, Eimish Dalshim Be'ilam, one cannot use a tree on Shabbos. Amalei, so Rav Nachman responded, there's a difference. Hasam, the case in our Mishnah is speaking about Be'uzridin. We're speaking about kanim, these bamboo sticks, which have already hardened, which have already developed, and they're classified as trees. In which case they're included in the Issa Rabbanan, who prohibit using a tree on Shabbos. In contrast to our case, where they were merely soft and flimsy and pliable, in which case they were classified as vegetation, as yorek, as vegetables, and therefore there's no Issa Rabbanan when it comes to using these things. The Rabbanan only made an Issa on something which is hard. You might go climb up on it and make yourself comfortable, pull out some branches, but something which is soft and pliable was never included in the Issa Rabbanan. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. So if you take a look at the left side here in Rashi column, just go 7 lines up, beginning with the word Uzridin. So this is Rav Nachman speaking, that the case of the Mishnah was speaking about hardened konim. Shehuk shekfar, she already developed and become hard. Harei ki'ilan, they were regarded as a tree. V'chisharina, the case that I allowed, was b'she'einu uzradin. They were not yet hardened. Boishak hakonim urachim, but they were still soft. Not like kiyarek, they're like vegetables, like vegetation. U'b'yarek le'iskiru cham shvus. Cham never applied the isser of using a plant or a tree when it concerns vegetation, grass, and the likes of something which is soft and not hard like a tree. So this is Rav Nachman's distinction. Something hard is considered like an ilan, in which case is an isser. Something which is soft and regarded like yerek is mutter. Umanat heimra, how do you know the shanilan? That we can differentiate bein uzradin l'she'ein uzradin. When it comes to the same type of product, same pole, the same kana. Well, you're making that distinction. If it's still undeveloped and soft and pliable, we regard it and classified like a yorek, like a vegetable, like a vegetation. It was never included in the Issa. As opposed to Izradin, in which case they've been developed and hardened, now you classify like an ila, like a tree. How do you know to make that chiluk in the same plant? At one point it's considered like a yerek, at one point like an ilan. Says more, yes, we find elsewhere, pertaining to the halacha of kalayim, the same kana, the same bamboo stick. When it's soft, it's considered like a yarak. When it's hard, like an ilan. The sanya, as we learned, hakanim, these poles, these reeds, ve'itidin v'higin, different types of bushes, min ilanheim. They're classified as a tree species. Ve'enon kalayim bekerem. And one can plant them in a vineyard because a tree in a vineyard is not considered kalayim. Only yerek and grain are considered to be kalayim bekerem, but these konim, etc., which are classified as a min ilan, pose no concern with regard to planting in a vineyard. So here we have the kana classified as a ilan. We have another brisa which classifies the kana as a yerek. Hakonim, v'akidan, that's a type of incense. For Eruvin, some type of, some say it's a arava, some type of arava plant. So here we have the konim listed in the second brisa, min yarakain. All these are considered a type of yerek, type of vegetable vegetation. Ve'kalayim bekerem. And one cannot plant them in a kerem. Kasha adadi. We seem to have a kasha from the first brisa, who tells us that a kana is considered min ilan, classified as a tree, in contrast to the second brisa, which classifies it as a yarek. Ella shmamana, apparently there's a difference. Kan be'uzradin, the first brisa which classified it as an ilan, was referring to hardened bamboo sticks. Kan Mishain was in the second brayso, which regarded as a yarek, was speaking about undeveloped kanim, which are considered like a yarek. Shema Mina, indeed, we have a conclusive raya from here to differentiate between soft and hard kanim. Continues the Gemara, one more thing. The kida ben yaraku. In the second brayso, we listed kida as a type of yarek. Is that the case? Vatnan ein markiven pegam al gabe keda levana. One cannot graft pegam, this type of plant, together with the kida levana. So this is a form of kalaim, to graft two species, two minim together. One cannot do that with pneishu yarek bilan, because you're grafting the keda, which is a type of vegetable, yarek, bilan, in the kida levana, which is a type of tree. So here we see that kida is a tree and not a yarek. Amar Papa, it depends what type of kida. There are two varieties. Kida lechud, the kida levana lechud. Kida, just plain kida, indeed is regarded as a yarek. In the Mishnah, where we see that the kida levana is considered an ilan, kida levana lechud, that's a different type of variety. It's a kida levana, which indeed is considered to be a min ilan. So in summary, with regards to the kanim, the Gemara made that differentiation for us. If they're hardened, there was rodden, in which case they're classified as a tree. So we learn that they don't pose kilayim, a concern of kilayim by a kerem, because they're considered to be an ilan. And when it comes to using on Shabbos, we're not allowed to use these hardened kanim on Shabbos. They're classified as an ilan. And the Gemara tells us a chiddush, even according to Rebbe, who generally does not apply the Issa D'Rabbanan during Ben Hashmashis. But in this case, there's an added concern. Since it's merely a kana, which can be easily trimmed and snipped, there's a concern that he might do that even Ben Hashmashis, which involves a melacha deraisa, and therefore, Gemara tells us that one cannot place an erev on top of a kana for concern that it might lead him to do melacha. The Gemara tells us about the kanim, which are not uzradin, which are rach, which are soft. They're regarded as a yarek, as vegetation, and therefore one cannot place them in a kerem for concern of kalayim, and one may actually use them on Shabbos, such as in the story of Nachman and his Talmidim. They bent over these kanim, these soft reeds, and sat on them on Shabbos, because they're not considered like ilan, they're merely considered like vegetation, which was never included in the Issa D'Rabbanan, which disallowed using a tree on Shabbos. Continues the Mishnah. Nisani b'migdal. This person places erev in a closet, in this type of structure. V'avad hamafteach. And he lost the key to the migdal, in which case he has no access to his food. Now we're speaking about a case where the migdal was in Shayachit, and his makam shvisa is Shayachit. There's no concern of the food being in a different rishus of the person. But the problem here is that, practically speaking, he has no access to his food because it's in this locked closet. Harei ze'erev. Says the Mishnah, it works. And the Gemara will explain for us how. Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, he doesn't know that the key is in its place, meaning he has no access to the key. He lost the key. And the only way he can access his food is by breaking apart this structure, in erev. Rabbi Yehuda says this erev doesn't work. Says the Gemara, V'amai, why does the Tanakama tell us that when the food is sitting in this locked migdal, it can work as an erev? V'amai, hu b'makam echad. This fellow is situated in one location, ve'eruv b'makam acharu, and his erev, his food, is sitting in a different location. It's inaccessible. It's inside the closet. Says the Gemara, Rav Shmuel Dam Tavai, they both explained as follows: Hacha, the migdal shel leveinim askinan. We're speaking about the migdal, which was actually a structure comprised of bricks. The Gemara will tell us that the bricks were uncemented to each other, so they're just loosely lying bricks. Reb Meir, and the Tanakama Mishnah is actually Reb Meir. The Omar poiches lechatchila b'noito. Reb Meir says one can go ahead and actually, we're speaking at Yom Tov, he can go actually remove those bricks to access his food, because although it's considered to be at least midirabbanan, like he's demolishing, he's doing seiser, and also the bricks are muktzah. Nevertheless, Rameya says one can go ahead and do that on Yom Tov. This nan bayis shemil eyu piris. He filled up a room with fruit. Sosam, It was completely closed up, meaning he had no access to his fruit. The door got locked, he lost the key. V'nifchas, and somehow the wall came apart. Noitel makam pchas. He's allowed to reach in and take some fruit out of there. Now, what is the chiddush here? That we don't say that the fruit inside is muktzah, despite the fact that it was inaccessible until the bricks decided to fall apart. We don't consider that food to be unprepared for Shabbos and consider it to be muktzah, or speaking at Yom Tov. We don't consider it to be muktzah. Why? Because Rashi explains the following sheet is Reb Shimon, who says that something which is merely lacking preparation is not considered to be off limits on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So that's the sheet of the Tanna Kamma. If the wall came apart, then he can go and access his fruit. Reb Meir Omer, Poiches v'noitel lechatchila. He can initially go ahead and be poiches, remove the bricks to access his fruit. He can even do this lechatchila, poiches v'noitel, and go remove his fruit. So that's the pshat now Mishnah as well. We're speaking on a similar situation. So his food is stuck inside this migdal. We'll follow Shittas Reb Meir, who says he can go ahead and take apart the wall to access his food. So the food of the Erev is fully accessible, and therefore the Erev works. Says the Gemara, V'amar Rav Nachman bar Amar Shmuel, he told us that the case over there, the Mishnah and Beitza, regarding that bias, was speaking about Ba'avira de Livni, was speaking about uncemented bricks, which doesn't involve an Isser of Seiser, Malach of demolishing in HaTorah. So only there a mayor allows. How can you compare it to our case? Says the Marachanami here as well, we're speaking about Ba'avira de Livni, a similar situation where we have uncemented bricks. So that's the Pshat now Mishnah. He can remove those uncemented bricks to access his Erev. And apparently Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He holds, for some reason, you cannot remove those bricks. It's muktzah, they did not allow it for the sake of accessing his food. Says the Gemara, V'amar Rab Zera, b'Yom Tov amru. Didn't Rab Zera explain to us that that Mishnah, where it may allow removing the bricks, only pertains to Yom Tov? Where the Chacham allowed, on account of Simchas Yom Tov, to remove the bricks which are muktzah. Avalei b'Shabbos, but one cannot do that on Shabbos. And apparently Rab Yehuda disagrees. He holds that even on Yom Tov you can't do that. Says the Marachanami b'Yom Tov. Apparently our Mishnah is speaking about Yom Tov. So in summary, at this point in the Gemara, our Mishnah is speaking about an Erev which was established for Yom Tov, was sitting in this locked room which was constructed with these uncemented bricks. Tanna Kamma, whose Rameh allows removal of those bricks, we do away with Issa Muktzah for the sake of Simchas Yom Tov, and therefore he has full access to his Erev, and his Erev works. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He holds that one cannot remove those bricks even though they're uncemented. This is discussed in the Gemara Beitza. What is the reasoning of the two shittas? But in any case, Rabbi Yehuda disallows the access to the Erev because he can't remove those bricks. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says, unless he has the actual key in his possession, this Erev doesn't work due to his inaccessibility, or due to the fact that the Erev is inaccessible. Says the Gemara, okay, so we're speaking about uncemented bricks. We're speaking about Yom Tov. If that's the case, how are we going to explain the following brisa, which actually makes reference to the case, this very case discussed in our Mishnah? And the brisa says as follows: Reb Lezer Omer, Im be'ir avad, Eruv ve'eruv. If he lost the key somewhere in the city, then it works. The Erev works. Vim besada avad. But if he lost the key out in the field, in which case the key is inaccessible, ein Eruv ve'eruv, then the Erev doesn't work. So this is Reb Lezer disagrees with the Tanna Kamma's Rameh, and he says, look, you have to have access to your key. If you lost the key in the city, then you have access to the key, then it works. But otherwise, if it's out in the field, you can't retrieve that key, you can't open this migdal, the Erev is inaccessible and doesn't work. Let's just first take a look at Rashi, who explains this seemingly cryptic statement of Reb Lezer. What's the difference if it's in the southern ear? It says Rashi, 15 lines from the bottom of the Amid. Rashi's words is Im be'ir avad. So Im be'ir avad hamaftech, we lost the key in the city, Eruv ve'eruv, then it works. Why? It says Rashi, Di mashkachli, because if he'll find the key in the city, matzi ma'isile derech chatzeris v'gagois v'karfifis. So Rashi explains to us that if he lost the key in the city and he now found the key, he knows where it is, he has access. He can bring the key over to the makom of the Erev. Derech chatzeris, through courtyards, v'gagois, roofs, v'karfifas, these storage areas. Shekul rishus achas and Reb Shimon. Following Shimon's Shita holds that all these non-dwelling areas, these unroofed areas, are considered to be one and the same entity. They're categorized as one and the same type of rishus. And Reb Shimon allows an item to be transferred throughout all these areas without any need for Erev Chatzeris. So that's Shach Reb Lezer. He's following Shittas Reb Shimon. And if the key is somewhere in the city, he can go bring it. He can work his way through the courtyards, the roofs, the storage areas, and bring it over to the Migdal and open it up. However, but if he lost the key in the field, then he has no way to retrieve that key. Any Eruv Erev, because even if he finds the key, he can't bring it over to the Migdal. Let's get back to the Gemara. So Brisa tells us that Reb Lezer disagrees with Reb Meir. He says he'd have access to the key. So if the key is in the city, then he can bring it over, no problem. But if the key is out in the field, then he cannot bring it to the Migdal, and he can't have access to his food. Says the Gemara on the bottom line of the Amud, V'bi Yom Tov, but if we just established that the case here is discussing Yom Tov, right? That was the reason why Rameh allowed him to remove those bricks on account of Simchas Yom Tov. So we're speaking about on Yom Tov, Mali Ir Mali Sadeh. What difference does it make if the key is out in the field or in the city? On Yom Tov, you can carry the key regardless. So what is the pshat in Reb Lezer's distinction between field and city? Says apparently this brisa needs to be amended as though it's missing some words. And this is how we're meant to learn it. This Sunday of Migdal, the Tanna Kama begins and says he placed the Eruvin in a Migdal, the structure, and he locked the door to the structure, and he lost his key. Harei the Eruv, then it works. Why? Because he can pull out those bricks, which were uncemented. When is this said? B'Yom Tov, where we allow him to remove those bricks. Aval b'Shabbos, ein Eruv Eruv on Shabbos, he can't remove those bricks. So let's take a Rashi on top here. Top line, Aval b'Shabbos, ein Eruv Eruv, the leishar l'Rabbanan, l'Mister, Rabban did not allow him to demolish the structure, even though it's uncemented bricks. Perhaps because of Muktzah, perhaps there's an additional concern because of Saisar. In any case, on Shabbos, he cannot remove those bricks. Therefore, this halacha pertains strictly to Yom Tov. Now, Nimtza Mafteach. Let's say he actually found the key. Oh, I found the key, now I can go open up the Migdal. Tanna Kama says, Bein Be'ir, Bein Besada. Whether he found the key somewhere in the city, or out in the field, Ein Eruv Eruv. And it doesn't work, because he cannot possibly bring that key over to the Migdal. Because Tanna Kama does not hold like Reb Shimon. He says, just as you can't transfer the key through the field, you can't transfer it through all these unroofed areas within the city, the gagos, the chatzeres, karfivos, without first making an eruv. Therefore, he says, even if you know where the key is, since you can't bring the key over here, and we're speaking on Shabbos, so you can't carry the key, and we're speaking on Shabbos, so you can't pull out those bricks, therefore, Tanna Kama maintains, this eruv won't work. Reb Lezer Omer, he disagrees. He says, look, I hold you can't pull out bricks, even on Yom Tov. But, let's say he knows where the key is. He located his key. Then it depends. Be'ir Eruv Erev. If the key was located somewhere in the city, then it works because he can bring it through. He can maneuver his way through the gagos, the chatzeres, and kafifos, and bring it to the Migdal and access his food. Because Reb Lezer holds like Reb Shimon. Beside the Eruv Erev, when it comes to the field, I agree, it doesn't work because he has no way of transporting the key over to the Migdal on Shabbos. Explains the Gemara. Be'ir Eruv Erev Reb Shimon, the Amar echad gagos, vechad chatzeros, vechad kafifos. All these unroofed areas are considered to be one and the same category of jurisdictions. Rishus achasem lekelim sheshafsa b'soicham pertains strictly to a kli which rested in these areas at the onset of Shabbos. Meaning, if a utensil was present in any of these chatzeros, gagos, and karfifos at the entry point of Shabbos, in which case this kli is not considered to be designated for use in a mokum dira, in a roofed area. It's been sitting out in the unroofed area, so it's like a non-dwelling type of kli. So once it's been categorized as that type of utensil, it can be transferred throughout all these non-dwelling areas. So that's Shittas Reb Shimon, which we discussed many times. And Reb Lezer conforms with that shita, and therefore he says if you find the key somewhere in the city, you're okay to bring it back to the Migdal by porting it through all these areas. However, beside if you found the key out in the field, there's no way to get it. Ein Eruv Erev K'Rabbanan. In this case, the Erev doesn't work. K'Rabbanan. Now, the Rechanal explains the word Rabbanan here is actually in reference to a different Rabbanan, who hold later on in Masechta that the Gemara discusses whether a person can go ahead and transfer something by passing it from one person to the next. So Rabbanan don't allow that option to be employed. More he's referencing that shita. So if you find the key on the side, there's no way to bring it over to the migdal because you can't go transfer it from person to person, according to the shitas Rabbanan found elsewhere in the Masechta. In any case, Rabbi Lezer holds that I don't agree you can pull out those bricks. I disagree with Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Lezer says in our Mishnah. Unless he has access to the key, this Eruv is considered to be inaccessible. But if he found the key, then it depends. If it's out in the field, surely the Eruv doesn't work because he can't bring the key over here. But if he found it in the city, in which case he has a way to bring it back to the migdal by maneuvering through the gagas, the chartzeres, and the karfifas, and according to Reb Shimon, who allows that to be done, therefore the Eruv will work. So in summary, the Mishnah told us about a case where he placed an Eruv in a migdal. The Gemara tells us we're speaking about a migdal which was constructed with these loose, uncemented bricks, Avira Delivni. That depends whether we're speaking about Yontiv or Shabbos. If the Eruv was established for the sake of Yontiv, and the concern here is whether he's allowed to remove those bricks, because he doesn't have the key. He needs to remove the bricks to get to his food. Rameya says, this Eruv works because he's allowed to actually be poiches, v'noitel. He can remove the bricks to access his food. Whereas Rabbi Lezer disagrees. He says, one is not allowed to remove bricks from the structure on Yom Tov. Therefore, he says, if he doesn't have the key, the Eruv won't work. Now, the Eruv which was established for the sake of Shabbos, and he actually located his key somewhere. In this case, Rabbi will hold as follows. Removal of those bricks are awesome. And therefore, he can't really access his food because he can't remove the bricks. Nor can he access his key because his key is sitting out either in the sada, in which case it can't be brought over, or even in the ear, in which case it can't be brought over here because we require Erev Chatzeris to be established to allow the key to be transported through the courtyards. Whereas Rabbi Lezer holds that even if it's Shabbos, but once he located the key somewhere, so if he located it out in the field, in which case he can't transport the key, the Eruv is inaccessible and won't take effect. But if he found the key somewhere in the city, in which case he can transport it through the chatzeres, the gagas, the karfifos, in accordance with Shizr of Shimon, in this case he has full access to his Eruv food because he can bring the key over here and open this locked closet. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. The Gemara began with a discussion of the concept of hoyel, which was introduced by Rav Yirmiyah, who told us if a person hangs his Eruv in a basket up high on a tree where it's a Rosh Hashanah, and his Makom Shvis is down below at the trunk of the tree, at the base, which is Rosh Hashanah, that Eruv is valid because he can go tip the basket, bring it down to his Makom Shvis. The Gemara is the kasha from a brisa, which seemed to indicate that hoyel cannot be applied to Eruv. The brisa discussed two different situations. Number one, where the Makom Shvisa was in Rosh Hashanah. The brisa tells us if he placed the Eruv on a wall, so it depends how high. If it's above 10 tefachim, which is Rosh Hashanah, then it won't work because he's in Rosh Hashanah. The Eruv is Rosh Hashanah. If the Eruv was below 10 tefachim, then it works because they're both in Rosh Hashanah. The brisa continues the case where his Makom Shvisa was up on a closet, which is a Rosh Hashanah, and his Eruv was in a nearby wall. Then it depends as follows. If the Eruv was above 10 tefachim, then it's fine because they're both in Rosh Hashanah. If it was below 10 tefachim, in which case it's in Rosh Hashanah, then it won't work because he's up on the closet, which is Rosh Hashanah. The Eruv is Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara asks, well, why can't he tip the closet to bring the surface down to the level of the Eruv? The Gemara gave us two answers. Either we're speaking about a nailed closet, which can't be turned sideways, or we're speaking about a very tall closet, in which case if he tries to tip it over and apply the concept of hoyel, the top surface of the closet will have to be pushed away, removed more than 4 amas from the original Makom Shvisa. And in this case, the original Makom Shvisa doesn't have access to the food of the Eruv, and therefore the Eruv doesn't work. Mar tells us we're speaking about that he doesn't have a rope to hold on to his Eruv, because had he attached a rope to his Eruv, then it would work because theoretically he can retrieve it during Ben Hashmashos, since the rope is still in his hand. The Gemara proceeded to explain the halacha in the Mishnah, which told us that if you place an Eruv in a deep pit, it works. The Gemara concluded we're speaking about a pit which is situated in a field which is a kamlis. His Makom Shvisa was up above in the kamlis. The Eruv was down below in the pit, which is Rosh Hashanah. We're following Shita's Rebbe, who says although transferring the food to the Makom Shvisa involves a Issa D'Rabbanan, transferring from Shesach to Karmelis, Isser Rabban does not apply Ben Hashmashis, which is the very point that the Eruv takes effect. We discussed an Eruv being placed on a Kana. The Gemara tells us there are two types of Kanim. When the Kanim are Uzridin, are hardened and fully developed, they're classified as a tree. Whereas when they're Ein Uzridin, when they're just soft, they're classified as a Yarak, as vegetation. And has two ramifications. When we're classified as a tree, then you can plant it in a kerem. There's no kalayim there. But you can't use that on Shabbos, because one's not meant to use or climb up on a tree on Shabbos. The Gemara tells us, even according to Rabbi, who generally says that there's no Issa D'Rabbanan Ben Hashmashis. But using a pole, a bamboo stick, for instance, to place your Eruv on it, involves an increased concern, perhaps due to the fact that it's easy to trim, easy to snip. He'll go ahead and do that, and do a malach on Shabbos. Therefore, the Mishnah tells us he cannot place an Eruv on this hard bamboo stick, even according to Rebbe. When we're speaking about a soft bamboo, which is classified as a yorak, that cannot be planted in a kerem for concern of kalayim. But one may use it on Shabbos, such as in the case of Rav Nachman, where they sat on these kanim, on these soft bamboos, which were bent down. So the Talmidim consider them on Shabbos because they're classified as a yorak, in which case they were not included in the Issa D'Rabbanan, which don't allow using a tree on Shabbos. Included with a case where he placed an Eruv in a migdal. The Gemara tells us we're speaking about a migdal which was constructed using uncemented bricks. The Gemara tells us it depends. If it's Yom Tov, he doesn't have a key, but he'd like to undo that structure. According to Rabbi, he can do that, and therefore he has access to that food. According to Rabbi, he cannot. When it's Shabbos, and he cannot remove those bricks, but he found his key. He found it either in the Sada or in the air, according to a mayor, that won't grant him access to his Eruv. Whereas according to Rabbi Lezer, if it's out in the field, then he has no access to his Eruv because he can't bring the key over here. But if the key is sitting in the city, in which case he can maneuver through the courtyards, the rooftops, and the storage areas and bring it over to the Migdal. In this case, he can have access to his Eruv. Therefore, according to Rabbi Lezer, this Eruv is valid for Shabbos.